Hey y'all, it's Editing Truth in the editing booth once again. For this segment of videos, we're going to have pretty much everything that I finished so far this year. Although there is still an upcoming video that's going to be all about one-shots that I read. Stay tuned for that. Also, fun fact, every series that I talked about in this video starts with the letter D for some reason. Anyway, we are now about at the halfway point of me editing my summer recap, so stay tuned for the rest. So I've actually bought quite a lot of manga so far this year, and the first series that I was reading all the way back in January was Dorohedoro, and as of this year I have finished this series. Overall, this is something that I would highly recommend. I'm sure I've talked about this in my past videos, but the artist here, Kyu Hayashida, has a style that is inimitable. There is nothing like her art style in the world. It's so hard to describe. It's very just rough and grimy and grungy and gory and horrific and dark. But at the same time, contrasting with that, basically all of the characters are great big goofballs. I love every single one of them. Now, if you haven't read this series before, the basic premise is that there is a world of sorcerers that lives sort of alongside and parallel the world of humans. The sort of main protagonists, I guess, come from this city called Hole, or if you're reading the Viz manga version of it, that would be called The Hole. And they essentially get victimized and bullied by all of the sorcerers who travel into their city, usually by these door portals, and just do magical experiments on all the citizens, usually resulting in horrible mutations and or deaths. And sort of the most prominent character of the series, his name is Kaiman, and he has the head of a lizard and also has amnesia. And it's sort of the driving force of the story is that he's trying to figure out who used magic on him to give him this lizard head, and also where are his memories. It just so happens that magic from the sorcerers can only be undone either by the original sorcerer themselves, or if somebody kills the sorcerer who cast the spell. And so Kaiman is basically going along with his best friend Nikaido, pictured here as well, and they are killing all sorcerers in their path until they can get to the right one to undo his lizard head curse. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that all of the characters in this series are big goofballs, and I love all of them. Really, like, every character in this series has a sort of lackadaisical approach to death, because honestly, there are a lot of ways in this world to undo death. Death is not exactly a permanent thing. In fact, the citizens of Hole have a yearly tradition, which is Night of the Living Dead Day, where a lot of their people come back to life as zombies, and the general citizens make it a sort of contest to see who can destroy the most zombies. So really, every character in this series is a psychopath. They all just kill constantly and don't really think anything of it. There's also a race of devils in this setting, and they are sort of above both humans and sorcerers, and they basically just make it their life goal to troll as many people as possible. Basically all they do all day is like horrific mischief and pranks. Anyway, there is sort of a vibe in this series that the sorcerers are sort of meant to be the bad guys, obviously because they do a lot of horrific magical experiments on the humans, but even the sorcerer characters, you can't really hate them. One of the main sorcerers is sort of this mob boss. His name is N, and he's one of the most powerful sorcerers in the world, and he has this whole family that he keeps by his side. Basically just all of his best friends, or people whose powers that he considers valuable to him. And yet, like, it's nice to see how he's not just manipulating people or just, like, controlling them, but actually genuinely cares about a lot of the people around him. Like, he's genuinely downtrodden when he learns that he is not another character's favorite person. He also has this little pet creature that I absolutely love, who is named Kikurage. This is a great name because N has mushroom-themed powers. Basically, he can turn any object or person into mushrooms, and Kikurage is a type of mushroom. Now, the really bizarre thing about that in the Viz Media manga translations is that, contrary to the anime adaptation that you might have seen, you know, they got one season, and tragically probably isn't getting any more than that one season. The Viz manga calls Kikurage Judas's ear, and that was a really jarring name change to read. But as it turns out, apparently another name for Kikurage mushrooms is Judas's ear mushrooms, which was a term I had never heard before. I had heard of Kikurage mushrooms, like I've read recipes that will call for Kikurage mushrooms, and so I knew vaguely what they were. I had never in my life heard the term Judas's ear, and so it's really weird to go through this whole series seeing them refer to that character by that name. Anyway, the whole reason I brought up this little animal character was because Kikurage has the power to bring the dead back to life, and so initially you think, oh, N is just keeping him as a pet in order to protect himself, so that if he ever dies, he can be brought back to life. And like, yes, there is that element to it, but you can see that he also loves Kikurage as a pet slash friend, I guess. And this is really just communicated in little details, like how when N goes to a social event, he makes sure to have matching suits made for both himself and Kikurage. It's just adorable, and it makes it really hard to hate a character like that. That's the kind of just, like, wholesomeness you get throughout Dorohedoro, constantly punctuated with horrific violence. Now, personally, I think the artwork and art style are reason enough to own this series. The story is pretty good as well, but my advice if you go into it is try not to take too long of a break in reading this series, because I will say there are mysteries that are set up at the very beginning, you know, relating specifically to Kaiman's identity, and you're not gonna really get solid answers about those mysteries until, like, you're in the teens or 20s of volumes, of which there are only 23 in total. But I gotta say, yeah, if you take a break from the series, it can be hard to kind of keep track of everything that was going on and all the information that had been revealed up to that point. So I'd say, yeah, if you're going to read it, then stick with it until the end. Some of my favorite characters, I mean, aside from, like, Kikurage, I love that there is a human character named Johnson, who is just a giant cockroach, who presumably got transformed by a sorcerer at some point, and you never really find out any more information than that about Johnson. He's just a big cockroach guy the whole time. Spoilers, he never gets turned back into a human. You never really find out who cursed him. He's just a cockroach man. He's just there. He's cool. I also love Ebisu, who is kind of this, like, little girl, I guess. It's not really clear how old she is, but she's probably, like, early to mid-teens, if anything. She spends the entire series getting absolutely fucked up. um, in her first appearance, you are pretty much gonna see Kaiman rip her entire face off, and things pretty much just get worse and worse for her as the series goes on. But she's also like a kind of like heartfelt and honest and great character at the same time. Like, if this was any other series, you would want to see only the best for her. But, you know, knowing what a all-around horrific world this is, you're just kind of like, well, yeah, I guess that kind of thing's gonna happen. Now, I've also got to give a special shout out to this series for doing something that I wish a lot more manga would do, and that is, basically, Volume 1 looks like this. The final volume looks like this. The later volumes overall get way thicker than the first volumes, but they are the same price all the way along, and I wish more manga would do that. I kind of get that this is like a staple of the industry, that they kind of can't do that most of the time. Most manga, you know, is just gonna get adapted into roughly 200-page volumes, and they're going to keep that uniform size throughout the series. But, you know, I think it's a really great incentive for collectors when you make the later volumes much longer, because you kind of want to incentivize people to keep buying those later volumes, because people will see that as you go on later into the series, there's more value in the later volumes than there is in the first ones. You might pick up a volume 1 just on an impulse buy and go like, yeah, you know, this is pretty good. But, you know, you might end up thinking, I don't know if I want to buy this series 23 times. But if you saw the absolute size of volume 23, you might go, well, okay, I mean, you're getting more for your money as you go along, so that makes the collection process more tolerable, I guess. Well, now that I have gone on and on and on about that series, also in January I was finishing up reading Demon Slayer. I don't really have a whole lot to say about Demon Slayer. It's, you know, one of the most popular manga out there in the world right now, so you're probably aware of it yourself. Basically, the main thing that spurred me to start reading Demon Slayer was I had watched the most recent anime arc, which was the Entertainment District, and I had the feeling of, you know, this is like really amazing, spectacular, world-class animation. It's also kind of going on for a long time, and I just kind of want to know what happens in the story next. So I just speedran to the end of the series, read every volume, and the kind of unfortunate thing that started happening as I was reading it was I started thinking, man, I can't wait to see these action scenes animated. But, you know, that's just kind of my overall vibe of Demon Slayer. Is it's a very standard shonen action series, and the anime really is elevated by this absolutely stunning world-class animation. Some of the best action scenes you will ever see animated. So, you know, if anybody ever asks me, should I read Demon Slayer or should I watch Demon Slayer, I'll be like, Most of the time I would say, oh, read the series, you gotta read the series, you'll get so much more out of the manga than you will out of any anime. But with Demon Slayer, I'm just kinda like, if you can wait, the anime will probably be better. Obviously, like, not that the manga is bad, but it's just, the anime, for one thing, does a really good job of communicating the artist's art style onto the screen. but also, once again, gives you way more spectacle when it comes to the action scenes. And in my opinion, that's worth waiting for. Before I had read Demon Slayer, some people had told me like they thought the ending was trash. I don't think it is. I think the ending is totally serviceable. It's pretty much everything I expected. It didn't really do anything to subvert my expectations. As I have said, it's very standard shonen action series, and so I don't think I'm spoiling very much if I say, well, the good guys beat the bad guys, and then they live happily ever after. You're not really reading or watching to get anything greater than that out of the series. What you're reading and watching for is those spectacular action scenes along the way. This is not the kind of series that is going to, change your perspective of good and evil or question your spectrum of morality. It's to watch a good boy beat evil demons with his sword skills. After that, I read some Dr. Stone. I actually have one more volume to go on Dr. Stone, and I think the final volume is coming out any day now. Somehow I have not been totally spoiled on what's going to happen in the final volume. But, Dr. Stone, both the manga and the anime have been, solid 8 out of 10 series for me. And, what can I say about Dr. Stone up to this point? As always, it has world-class art. I have sung the praises of Boichi before this. I think he is one of the best manga artists working in the industry today, and his work in Dr. Stone continues to impress. What I will say as I'm heading into the final volume of Dr. Stone is my prediction is it's probably going to be cramming a whole lot of story progress into this final volume. Basically, the characters are just now finally on their way to confronting what seems to be the source of what turned the whole human race to stone all the way back in Chapter 1. And I don't know if one more volume is really enough time to flesh out that conflict and the discoveries that they have yet to make. So I'm predicting that the ending will probably feel rushed, but I will deliver that final verdict when I do actually read the final volume later this year. So stay tuned for that in the next video. Oh, so I'd like to add here that I read the final volume of Dr. Stone in between my last recording sessions. I realized it actually had been in the manga cafe for several days at the time of my last recording, so I did finally go back and read that. I thought overall the ending was pretty good. It did feel like it went by a little fast. It felt like it was getting to that point of okay, we gotta wrap this fucking thing up. We gotta finish this manga already. And I guess to spoil something that doesn't happen, they never really find out exactly how everybody got turned to stone. If you are in the middle of the series, you might have realized, oh, they have found a device that will turn people to stone, and this must be what caused it. But I kind of expected they wouldn't really get into, the nitty-gritty of how that worked, and I was right. So there were definitely, some unanswered questions in the end, but I felt like it was presented in a way that those unanswered questions were fine. And interestingly, the ending teased a to be continued for the series, but I haven't heard anything about a continuation of the series happening. I'm not aware if that is a thing. If it does happen, I'm always happy to see more Boichi art. Okay, I have looked this up now. There has been an epilogue chapter of Dr. Stone published about a year ago. It was called Dr. Stone Terraforming. I don't know if I'm gonna read that. I mean, I might, it's just one chapter. But yeah, as of now, what I can see is it doesn't seem like a Dr. Stone full-on sequel has started. Personally, I would be fine if Dr. Stone is just finished forever. It had a good run, and it had a good ending. I'll tell you, one thing I would really like to see Boichi do in particular is make a horror series. Because in his other works that I've seen, like Origin and, well, Dr. Stone, and I guess that's it, like, the little brief elements of horror that you get to see in his series are just fantastic looking. So I kind of wish he would do a full-on horror genre work. Now, in my last video I mentioned I had been reading Dead Demons Destruction, and I was even wearing a t-shirt which had artwork from the series on it. Well, earlier this year, the final volume came out, and I really love this series. I will say, I don't think the final volume was, like, all that. It was not everything in the world to me, but the story along the way was still absolutely 100% worth it. I would still wholeheartedly recommend that everybody read that series. And I'm still very fascinated to see the upcoming anime, which we still haven't really gotten any new details about. I don't want to spoil too much about kind of what goes down in the final volume, but I feel like it didn't really take its time to, like, really, like, satisfyingly address all of the sort of conflict that arose in the previous volume, because volume 11 was tremendous. I left that volume thinking, I cannot wait to see where else this goes. And I don't know, to put it in as unspoilery of terms as possible, I kind of feel like volume 12 took an easy way out, kind of like retconned a lot of stuff in a way, and it was, you know, a fine ending, but did not, like, blow me away like the volume right before it had done. I'm still very much eager to read more by this artist. He does have a new series started. Let me look up the name of that real quick. Yeah, so he has begun a new series as of March that is called Mujina Into the Deep. I'm very much looking forward to reading that one. I'm probably gonna wait until it comes out in print in English, but you can bet that once that comes around, I will be reading it, if not buying every volume of it. I might like to go into, like, a deeper dive on this series one day in the future, because there really is just a ton to unpack within it. It's so, like, just layered in, like, its levels of, like, social commentary and commentary about other manga, and it's a cool, like, clash between, like, newer and older art styles and storytelling methods that, like, I could go on for hours talking about just this series. Still comes out with a recommendation for me, even if the ending wasn't my favorite. A tremendous thanks to everyone who has generously decided to fund me and my projects. I'm now gonna turn it over to Charlie so he can tell you all about the last manga he finished.